Well, we have a busy noonday for session for you all, so we'll get started as others join. Welcome to Preservation Academy. I'm Elizabeth Castelny, CEO for Preservation Virginia, and I'm coming to you from our Richmond offices. While I want to begin our session with some thank yous to the Virginia Department of Historic Resources for their support and collaboration on the 23 series of educational offerings. And I want to recognize especially Julie Langen, who wasn't able to join us today, but certainly is one of our treasured partners, as well as Amanda Terrell, Tim Roberts, and everyone else involved. I also want to express my appreciation to Sonia Ingram's tireless work in finding the speakers and organizing the sessions and making sure we all stay on time. So thank you, Sonia. And to all of our panelists today who have devoted time and effort to prepare for this session. We're also indebted to our sponsors, Peachtree House Foundation, Daniel and Company, Monument Companies, Historic Richmond, and Commonwealth Advisors. And I want to thank all of you. Your registration fees help underwrite this programming and our other educational and community engagement endeavors. Now for a bit of housekeeping that we've all come to know and love during our Zoom years. To make the most of our time together, we're going to hold questions to the end, but you can send us your questions at any time by using the chat box at the end of this, at the bottom of your screen. We'll be keeping a record of those and get to as many of the questions as we can that time allows. Often, when they're really good questions, we also will respond after the session is over. So look for your inbox. You can also turn on the closed captions by going to the bottom of the Zoom screen and locating the three dots that say More. Click on the captions, and then you should see Show Captions. That the instructions will also be put in the chat box, so you can see that. This session is being recorded, and you will receive a link in several days to this recording. And once we've collated that link, it'll be posted on Preservation Virginia's and DHR's website, so available to you at any time. So that brings me to the topic today: historical highway markers. If you're anything like me, you love exploring Virginia's neighborhoods and scenic roads and countrysides. And what makes it intriguing is discovering the history that's connected to those areas. I feel like I've hit the jackpot when I find a historical marker. My husband and I have done our fair share of U-turns and pull-offs, sometimes abruptly, to absorb the history found on these markers. We've been drawn to them as we've explored downtowns and cities, streetscapes. Each marker gives us context and a jumping off point to learn more. But how are these markers organized? Who determines the content? How are they produced? These questions and more will be explored by our panelists today. So it gives me great pleasure right now to turn over the screen to Amanda Terrell, Director of Community Services Division at the Department of Historic Resources. So welcome, Amanda.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and hello, everyone. I am Amanda Terrell, the Director of the Community Services Division at the Department of Historic Resources. I'm standing in today for our Director of DHR, Julie Langen, who had an offsite meeting today. But I'm really pleased to be here to help kick off the second session of the 2023 Preservation Academy. The Preservation Academy is a partnership between Preservation Virginia and DHR, and it's one that's beneficial to our organizations and hopefully to the larger preservation community. We have some great topics this season. Today's topic is related to one of the most popular programs in our office, the Historical Highway Marker Program. This program is the oldest such program in the country, started in 1927. And while DHR's program is very popular, we want to share that excitement and encourage localities to establish their very own marker program. And so now I will turn it over to our moderator, Tim Roberts, who is the Community Outreach Coordinator for DHR.
Thanks, Amanda. Good afternoon, everyone. Without further ado, as Community Outreach Coordinator, it is my privilege to introduce our panelists today. We have Dr. Jen Loux, get her title right, Highway Marker Program Manager at the Virginia Department of Historic Resources, Justin Patton, County Archaeologist for Prince William County, and Mark Reed, Historic Preservation Planner for the City of Virginia Beach. Please join me out there in internet land in welcoming our panelists, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Loux to start us off.
Thank you, Tim. Please bear with me while I share my screen here. All right, can you all see my screen okay? Okay, thanks. So hello and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here today to learn a little bit more about Virginia's state and local marker programs. I'm going to kick things off by providing an overview of how the state historical marker program operates. And I hope this information will be of use to anyone who might want to apply for a state marker. My other objective in describing our procedures is to touch on some of the limitations of the state program to help demonstrate why the Department of Historic Resources is encouraging the establishment of local marker programs in Virginia's counties, cities, and towns. The state marker program began in 1927. And in 1966, it became the responsibility of the Virginia Landmarks Commission, which was the predecessor agency of today's Department of Historic Resources, or DHR for short. There are now about 2,600 markers in the system. And since the 1970s, most new markers have been proposed via an application process in which any organization or individual may propose a marker topic, and then they pay for the manufacture of the sign if it is approved. The current cost is about $3,000. VDOT installs state markers in its right-of-way along state highways, and local public works departments install them in independent cities and towns. Here is the program's statement of purpose, and I'll read it because it really contains some essential information. So the Virginia Historical Highway Marker Program documents facts, persons, events, and places prominently identified with the history of the nation, state, or region. DHR's purpose in erecting markers is to educate the public about Virginia's history, not to honor, memorialize, or commemorate persons, events, or places. Because highway markers are not honorific in nature, they do not serve the same purpose as monuments, statues, memorial plaques, or war memorials. And so I think the two crucial elements here are, number one, that markers are educational, not honorific in nature. And number two, state markers must be limited to subjects of national, state, or regional significance. This means that topics of local significance do not qualify. And just to clarify, this certainly doesn't mean that we think local topics are unimportant in any way. It's just that the Code of Virginia defines them as ineligible for the state program. Taking a closer look at the state program's eligibility requirements, we can see that the proposed topic must have achieved its significance at least 50 years ago. A marker cannot focus on a living person, and the text must be thoroughly documented, preferably with primary sources. And by primary sources, we mean materials created at the time of the historical event, such as deeds, school board minutes, contemporary newspaper articles, court records, and the like. All marker texts receive a word-by-word fact check from DHR staff, so this documentation is vital. So what you see listed here on the screen are just kind of the most basic eligibility requirements, and I'll talk more specifically in a minute about what it actually takes for a marker application to be approved. To apply for a state marker, you can find our application form on the Department of Historic Resources website. And please make sure you're using the most recent version of the form, because if you downloaded a copy in the last year or two, a lot has changed since then. There are 4 application deadlines throughout the year, and these correspond to the quarterly meetings of the Virginia Board of Historic Resources. This board, which is composed of 7 members appointed by the governor, is responsible for approving all new state highway markers. At each board meeting, only 5 applications from the public will be approved. And we've typically been receiving about 15 to 20 applications per deadline. So this, of course, means that there are a lot of good projects that don't quite make the top 5. So how are the top 5 applications selected? A committee of DHR staff reviews all applications and scores them based on the rubric that you can see here. Each of these statements is worth a certain number of points for a total of 100. Proposals that receive the highest scores are those that have a great potential to educate the public, address a topic that the program has not extensively covered, focus on the history of a community that has been marginalized or underrepresented, demonstrate broad significance, preferably on the national or state level. The points are also given for regional significance. And finally, contribute to a more equitable geographic distribution of markers across the state. As some of you may be aware, if you've worked with us in the past, this scoring system is relatively new. It had to be implemented last year because we had reached a point where we were adding more than 50 new markers to the system each year, in addition to about 10 to 20 replacement markers. And that rate of growth really became unsustainable. Marker program staff at DHR consists only of myself and 1 part-time researcher, and we began to have trouble keeping up with the workload. In addition, VDOT's sign contractor is not set up to be installing that many markers each year and maintaining them in perpetuity. And also the foundry that manufactures the markers, which is Siwa Studios in Ohio, has developed such an immense backlog that right now we have more than 50 markers on order with them, and neither we nor they could really predict when those will actually be made and delivered. So therefore, in order to satisfy the extremely high demand for historical marking, it would be a wonderful development if more counties, cities, and towns considered establishing their own local marker programs. Some people, places, and events are of profound significance within their community, but they don't meet the regional, statewide, or national level necessary for a state marker. And it would be great if the public could learn more about them through a local program. Other topics might meet the basic requirements for a state marker, but they don't receive scores that place them in the top 5, and perhaps they could be featured on a local marker. The Code of Virginia states that the governing body of any county, city, or town may erect historical markers. To begin the process of setting up a program, a local official should contact me to discuss the plans. Ultimately, I would present the program for approval at one of the quarterly meetings of the Board of Historic Resources. When the board is considering whether to approve a local program, the crucial element is the design of the marker. The signs must be sufficiently different from the state markers in color, shape, and size. They also need to bear the name of the locality, and they should also bear the seal of the locality. The board will need to review a graphic image produced by the locality that shows the exact shape, color, design, dimensions, and font of the signage that will be in use. The board will want to see this image displayed alongside a photo of a state marker so that the members can compare and contrast the two easily. When deciding whether to approve a local program, the board is only going to be considering the appearance of the markers, not evaluating the topics that may be covered. After board approval, there's no further kind of state oversight. So the locality is responsible for the content and accuracy of its markers. The state does not review and approve the topics or language. One thing I'll note is that if you're managing a local marker program and someone comes to you with a topic that you think might be of statewide or national level significance, they should be directed to apply for a state marker first. And then if the topic is not selected as part of our top 5, then they may proceed with a local marker. When setting up a local program, it's very important to go through the process of receiving approval from the Board of Historic Resources because the Code of Virginia says it shall be unlawful to post or erect any historical marker, monument, sign, or notice on public property or upon any public street, road, or highway in the Commonwealth without the approval of the board. Here you can see a list of the existing board-approved programs, and it's possible that this list is not complete. So if you are aware of one that you don't see listed here, please let me know. You may see historical signage systems throughout Virginia that are not part of the state program and are not associated with a specific locality, including Civil War trails, the Civil Rights and Education Heritage Trail, and the Equal Justice Initiative markers. So each of these programs also had to receive approval from the Board of Historic Resources before beginning operation. Thank you very much for your attention today. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me at the email address you see here, which is jennifer.loux@dhr.virginia.gov. And I will now hand it over to Justin Patton, who will talk about the local marker program in Prince William County.
Thank you, Jennifer. Bear with me while I share my screen and start, hopefully. There we go. Well, good afternoon, everybody. As Jennifer said, my name is Justin Patton. I am the county archaeologist for Prince William County up in the northern part of the state. And thank you for joining us. I am based in, a little bit about me, I'm based in the county's planning office. I've been here for almost 18 years. And I also serve as, one of my duties, I serve as the liaison to our historical commission. And I've been serving in that capacity since 2012. That's how I became involved in the marker program. Kind of what I'd like to do today is kind of talk a little bit about the who, the how, the marker design itself, our fabricator, where markers are, where markers are installed, and how we get the word out about our program. Our historical commission manages our roadside marker program. And markers are treated as a publication, and thus are managed through our publications committee. The committee accepts proposals from other commissioners, county staff, community preservation stakeholders, and elected officials and developers, and so on. They prepare the text sometimes from scratch, or when proposals are accepted, there's a draft text included with them, and they work through their editorial process and finalize the marker text. This text is then presented to the full commission for review during a regularly scheduled meeting, and at some point is usually approved at a subsequent meeting unless there are revisions or questions about the accuracy of some of the statements within the text. But eventually all markers are end up with approved text and going through that rigorous review process. Our county is really fortunate. We have the chair of our publications committee is a professional historian from the National Park Service and has training in historical research and training in developing and implementing interpretive signage. So we're very, very fortunate. And he's very detail oriented, which is exactly what you want when you're looking at a marker program and looking at text where every word matters. Depending on the origin of the marker request, publication request, the funding for the marker is generally sourced from one of the following. The Historical Commission has their own budget, and they often pay for markers through their annual budget appropriation. We have had markers that were donated to the county. The text is approved again by the Historical Commission. But once the text is approved, the donator will order the marker directly from the CWA Studios. We use the same foundry as Department of Historic Resources, and then that marker is delivered directly to the county, and then we do an installation. And then the third component is through our rezoning proffers or special use permit conditions. And this is often agreed upon through our land development process during our rezoning and special use permit review. Once we approve the text, and if we are funding it, we send our order into CWA Studios for the marker and pole. And once that fabrication is complete and the marker is shipped, we will install it. Throughout this process, there are a number of county staff that support it. Myself, our planning office purchasing department, our Office of Historic Preservation, not Historic Resources, our Office of Historic Preservation, they manage our staffed historic sites, and they have a lot of interpretive staff. They look at it, and they're based out of our office or Department of Parks and Recreation and Tourism. And then also our not listed on here, I omitted a very important staff support, and that's our library staff in our relic room, which is probably the equivalent to many counties' Virginia room. And then we have staff in our public works department that does our installation. We have selected as our marker template the South Dakota model. As we said, from CWA Studios, they have a number of different marker templates. And there's the specifics there up on the screen, and there's an example on the right, and you can see the county seal on top. There are differences, design differences between ours and VDHR's. VDHR's is generally a little bit more blocky, and ours has 4 scrolls along it, and with the county seal on top. Here are some different examples of locations. We generally look to, since it is kind of a roadway marker program, We try to find locations where folks can pull off safely, or there's parking close by from which they can park and then walk to the marker and read it. Sometimes that's not always possible because we do like to get it as close as possible to the educational event. We always call Miss Utility. If it's in a VDOT right-of-way, we coordinate that location and installation with VDOT's regional office. Public land is, particularly county-owned land, is very easy. We don't need any approvals for that. We do install markers on private land, and usually there's some type of access agreement that we require so that we can maintain that marker and have rights of entry onto the land. We do kind of get the word out through a couple of different avenues. We print a paper marker guide, and on the right you'll see the front and back covers of that marker guide. It's dimensionally quite small and designed to fit into a pant or coat pocket. It's free. We distributed those through our libraries, our historic sites, our recreation centers, our visitors bureau, national parks, and various county offices. A long time ago, it was really an indexing system. In other words, it had a map and spots, icons located on that map with a numeric number, and then you could find the marker and the marker text through that number. We've tried a thematic organization where it's based on themes, and I'll show you an example in a little bit on our storybook. And then we've migrated back to more of an indexing system. Both work very well. It's the Historical Commission prefers the indexing system over more of a thematic approach. The other primary avenue is that we kind of educate the public about the marker program is through a storybook, an online storybook. This is an Esri storybook, which is a GIS product. And you can see on the top bar different themes. You can click on those themes, and markers populated in the map in a different location of the county. You can click on the numbers either on the map itself to the right or on the marker emblems, and up pops a larger picture of the marker as well as the full marker text. So if you can't drive around throughout the county, you can look at these markers and learn about the county's history through either the marker guide or this online storybook format. The final way that we kind of advertise about and generate interest in these markers is we typically have an unveiling ceremony. Again, these are usually managed by our Historical Commission. We don't do this for every marker, but we do it for some, and there's really it's really based on really the interest level of elected leaders. But we do invite our elected leaders. We invite, local preservation stakeholders that have an interest in the marker. We issue a press release and other advertisements on our websites. We do invite the press if it's about a person and there's descendants. Then we definitely invite the family there, and members of a group if it's associated with a group. And oftentimes also our elected leaderships, particularly our supervisors, want to be involved in these ceremonies. And it's a great way of getting the word out, not only about that marker, but about our marker program in general. So very effective. I want to, as I was thinking about this earlier this morning, for those that don't have a marker programs, I really want to encourage you to consider implementing a marker program. And as you think about it, sit down and kind of scope out all the possibilities of the things that you want to accomplish, and then work to narrow that down to what is actionable for your jurisdiction and for your goals. There's no reason why it can't be something very specific in the beginning and expand at a later point. There are investments both in money and resources and in labor to develop these programs, but they really do have some very good contributions that they make to our communities. They're effective, interpretive, and tools, and they're good for recognizing our local history. Markers are cost effective, even though we think about $3,000 as a big expense, and it is a big expense. They do last for a very long time. They are vandal and weather resistant. They obviously can have a local focus. And there's a number of different ways that you can include communities in these programs and, represent that local history. And obviously, we all know that tourism is an economic development driver, and they do help with that economic development. So thank you very much, and look forward to seeing your marker programs in the future. And I think I'm turning it over to Mark.
Thank you, Justin. If I can show my presentation as seamlessly as you and Jen, I'll be excited. Or if I can share it at all. You may see a full screen, you may see a screen with the next slide. If I can figure out how to do that, I will. Hopefully you're seeing the full screen now. Thanks for joining us today. I'm kind of at the other end of the spectrum from Prince William County. They have, I think, 95 or so local historical markers that they've installed, and we have approximately 95 fewer that we've installed here in Virginia Beach. So we have a new program and we're getting off the ground. And it is part of our historic preservation program. Our program is fairly new as well. The Historic Preservation Commission was created in 2008, established by City Council. Their primary mission is to increase public awareness and involvement. And the historical markers provide a great method for accomplishing that. It provides public awareness about our history, and it allows us to involve many people in the community in these markers, both in helping to create them, researching and providing the text, as well as in the unveiling ceremonies, which Justin talked about. In the case of the slide here, we have elected officials, mayor and city council person, and a state delegate. We have our commander from Little Creek, Fort Story. We have some city staff, DHR staff, as well as the lady on the far right in the top slide who wrote the text for the marker, and some folks in the bottom slide who came out in appropriate attire to help us do the unveiling. So in 2015, the Historic Preservation Commission decided they wanted to establish a marker program. So we started that process. not knowing too much about it, we contracted with a graphic artist, reviewed several design options, and I'll tell you right off the bat, you're not going to get a lot of consensus on the design. Everyone's going to have their ideas of what it should look like, what the colors should be, background and letter colors. So just hope you can at least get a majority opinion on that. We did make a final choice, and you see that here illustrated for you, and submitted it to DHR for program approval, and that happened pretty quickly. At that time, the Historic Preservation Commission only had a part-time employee to provide them with support and to manage the historic preservation program. So they were looking at ways to be able to move forward with the marker and other programs, and still, not overburden that part-time employee. And they established a research grant program. It's really kind of a unique program. Happy to talk to you all about it sometime. They provide grants to individual historians to do research papers, historical markers, interpretive sign panels, oral history interviews, and it's really been very successful for them. And so that was really how we started looking to implement the local marker program. And between 2016 and 2021, they provided research grants for 7 historical markers. As it turned out, all 7 were approved at the state level. So still, we hadn't done any local markers, but we were able to get an idea of how a program works through working with the state. We currently have 21 state markers in Virginia Beach. So you can see that we added a significant amount to what we had. We really increased by 50% the number of markers that we had when the commission started. Again, in the unveiling ceremony here, we have the NATO commander, and he brought his officers out with him. It's a great way to involve the community and generate interest. As Jen noted, there have been changes to the state historical marker program, and that really prompted the Historic Preservation Commission in Virginia Beach to revisit the local marker. We, in 2022, awarded 4 research grants for historical markers, kind of at the same time that DHR was making changes. So in the contracts for these grants, we included a clause that they could apply for a local marker if it wasn't approved for a state marker. Now, one of those 4 is actually in the top 5 coming up here in March, we think, for the Board of Historic Resources. So we're still trying to work through the state marker program if it's of state or national significance. One of these markers, though, we were pretty sure would not score very high in the state evaluation. It really is a local subject. And so for that one grant recipient, we suggested they might want to do an interpretive sign panel, especially because they were trying to do something in 2023 for the 60th anniversary of City of Virginia Beach becoming an independent city. But they said they really wanted to do a local marker, and that pushed us forward again into trying to pull off the local marker program and getting it set up. And I think you'll find that the Siwa Studios is the only game in town, or the only game in the country, or at least the primary one. I think they do, Jen probably knows, 45 or so of the state markers. And of course, they're doing Prince William County and a lot of local markers as well. So we just need to give them more business here. But we contacted them, and if you remember that earlier design, we said, here, how much would it cost for you to make one of these? And they basically said, we can't make that for you, but you can use one of our templates. So we didn't choose South Dakota, we chose the Maryland one, which you see there illustrated. And again, went through that whole selection of a design, selection of the colors for it. Again, you won't get consensus, but you can get a majority to agree. And I was really concerned about the city seal. It's got a lot of different colors, a lot of detail, but Siwa Studios hand paints these, so they can do something as detailed and as varied as your city or county seal. So again, we submitted this for approval to DHR because it was different from the design that they had approved previously. And just in December of 2022, the Board of Historic Resources approved this design and approved our local program. So we went back to Siwa and said, okay, this is what we're working with. Give us a quote. And so for 2023, they've guaranteed us a cost of $3,180 per marker that's shipped with a pole. And for this particular marker, we can get 13 lines of text with 43 characters per line, plus 1.5 or 2 inch one line title line at the top. Some things for you to consider. Prince William County is using their county seal. We're using our city seal. Someone controls the use of that in your county or city. So you need to get permission from them to use it on your local marker. It's probably your city clerk or your county clerk, but find out who controls it and get something in writing from them that says it's okay to use on your local marker. And then consider zoning. It's likely identified as a sign in some manner in your zoning ordinance. So if you can, try to get that process streamlined. Here in Virginia Beach, we went to the zoning administrator and discussed the program with them and showed them the sample of the marker. And they were able to establish a policy that as long as it's placed in the right of way, then it does not need to be reviewed by zoning and does not need a sign permit. So that kind of helped us to cut a little bit of red tape for moving forward. And then someone's going to need to install it for you. So probably your city or county public works folks are the ones to work with. Here in Virginia Beach, it's our public works highways. It is a roadside marker, and they're the ones who really have the capability of installing it, as well as the knowledge and expertise to make sure it's installed in a safe location. In our case, our Virginia Beach Public Works folks already had a letter on file with DHR to install the state markers. And so it's pretty easy to go to them and say, will you do this for local markers as well? And then as Jen kind of noted, your marker should document persons, places, and events. It shouldn't commemorate or honor, just it documents them for educational purposes. So how are we proceeding now? We've got our marker program and our marker design approved. Well, we are moving cautiously. We're not opening the floodgates for markers. Zoning has established for us that the markers are going to be approved by the Historic Preservation Commission and installed by Public Works in the right of way. Currently, staff is working on developing the program criteria and processes. And I wish I had everything in place. I could do it like Prince William County, because they've got a lot of folks that are involved in it that really helps take some of the burden, certainly off of Justin. So we're not accepting applications now except through our research grant program. So we have limited funding in that. So they're going to be limited on an annual basis. And we're also going to develop a few trial markers to help in our development of criterion processes. In one case, we're going to be working with a local civic league to document their historic community. So it gives us an opportunity to kind of see how those processes might work. And hopefully we can figure it out pretty well from the beginning. We recognize, though, that managing this program is simply work added to our existing responsibilities. Currently, we have just 1.5 FTEs for the preservation planning staff. So at least we're up from that full-time position, that part-time position, but still a lot of additional work would go into to doing some of these local markers. And we just want to thank you for attending. There's some contact information for you there. If you have questions for me, want to contact me about this or even our research grant program. And, to do your unveiling ceremony, you don't even have to have that marker installed and ready to go. You can always do a mock-up of it, and there you have it. It's still, if there's a specific date that you want to have it installed, or at least have the ceremony for, then do a mock-up, and that'll work really well for you. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark, and thanks to all of our panelists. Very informative. I too am very much a historical marker nerd and go on the scavenger hunts and pull over. So I'm really excited to see these developments happening at the local level. Before we move on to the Q&A session, I just want to, I forgot to mention that our panelists' full bios will be available on Preservation Virginia's website. So please check out their website to learn more about our speakers and future webinars as part of Preservation Academy. And with that, I guess we can jump into some of the really great questions that are coming in. You've got some for individual panelists and some for the group at large. I'll start with some general questions here, and this is for Dr. Loux. Do any and all historical signs or kiosks, etc., have to get DHR approval before being installed?
Well, what the Code of Virginia says is that any signage that is about a historical event that is placed in the public right-of-way, so along a public road or on public property, does need to get the approval of the Virginia Board of Historic Resources. Now, as we all know, after this presentation, a locality doesn't have to get the board's approval for each and every one of their markers. Once they establish their local program, then the locality is in charge of approving those, and the state board doesn't have to approve each one individually. So it's sort of a blanket approval by the board for the local programs. But yes, so I guess that section of code is intended to prevent people from just sort of putting up a sign in public property that has not been vetted by anyone.
Okay. Well, kind of opening this up to the, to some of the local programs. So Mark and Justin, one of the questions that came in is who's I'm trying to get the phrasing right here. So who will be reading over, researching, editing, et cetera, the text for local markers?
Mark, do you want to go first, or?
Well, my answer is a bit shorter. We haven't put that criteria and that process together yet. It'll certainly be our preservation staff. We likely are going to involve someone in our library. Our reference librarians have access to a lot of research materials that can assist them as well. And maybe a member or two from our Historic Preservation Commission. But I know Justin has kind of that process already set up and in place.
Yeah, our commissions, our historical commissions publications committee initiates that review of the text and researching and fact checking. And they will reach out to staff, various staff. Don Wilson from our libraries, or our Office of Historic Preservation or myself for fact checking locations or dates. The committee also does their own research. It just kind of depends on the marker and the content. And sometimes that research is very quick. It takes a month. Sometimes they work on it for several months. It just, I remember there was some marker about a son of the American Revolution, and we all thought we had the date right. And one of the library staff came back and said, "Oh, I found another reference somewhere, and that's actually not the date. It should be this date." So we had the approved text, and fortunately we hadn't ordered the marker, and we made a change and got it right. So it just kind of depends, but the lead group is our publications committee.
Okay. This is another local question. I'll read the question in its entirety. I think the second part is really something to dig into. Could you reiterate the role of local government in creating a local marker program? It's part one. And then the second question, and I'm kind of paraphrasing apologies to the person who asked this. Any advice on how to approach local government to encourage developing a local program?
I'm going to defer to Mark because I really inherited this program. I can talk more about advice on how to approach local leaders on that, but I'll defer to Mark since they're in the middle of creating their program.
Well, I think Jen had a slide that noted that a local official needs to make that application to DHR. So in our case, it was me, and our zoning administrator determined we didn't need to have an ordinance, and she obviously talked with others in our city government, but we didn't need an ordinance to establish the program. It's simply something that we were able to move forward with. So if you are outside looking in, if you have a preservation commission or a planning department, you might start with them, or even one of your elected officials that can kind of get things going from the top down. Ultimately, someone on the county or city staff is going to have to manage the program, and there certainly are going to be time involved, if not some costs. But I would try to target whatever department you think is going to be most likely. Usually, the preservation programs are associated with the planning departments, but could be your Parks and Recreation department. Figure that out in your locality, and talk to those staff people and see if they would be supportive of getting one started. And then, of course, they have to work through DHR to do that.
Thanks, Mark.
Exactly what Mark said. Wait, pointing this way. Exactly what Mark said. You need to. You're going to have to talk to multiple levels and get buy-in. Elected leadership is going to be critical because they're going to be the ones passing annual budgets. And you want to make sure that the staff is going to be supportive of a program of that as well. And like Mark noted, most of these preservation programs at the county levels are often tied to the planning office. It's typical that planning office provides some level of support for those programs, either as a liaison, in my case, or direct county support for programs like that. And it may take you several years of approaching these groups, but it can be done, and there are some pretty positive benefits to it.
So cost has come up for a few of these. Obviously, it's going to be a consideration at almost every level. There's a few cost questions in here. One is, who typically pays for local markers in Prince William County and Virginia Beach?
We pay for probably, in Prince William County, we pay for probably 75 to 90% of the markers through the Historical Commission's budget. The remainder are markers that are donated, and that happens occasionally every 5 years or so. Our markers are running about the same price as what Mark stated earlier. They're running $3,200. We actually budget, the commission actually budgets $3,500 when they approve marker text, and that includes installation costs as well. So we just, from a budgeting perspective, we say it's going to cost $3,500 to fabricate and install a marker. And if it's less than that, then, there's some cost savings in there. And some of the marker prices, I don't know if CWA is giving a flat rate now, but sometimes it varied. It used to vary on word count. I assume that was from the actual process of typesetting, but they may just give a flat cost now for a certain size marker and a certain size text size, font size.
And as I noted in my presentation, we've been given a quote from CWA, $3,180, and we haven't produced or installed a local marker yet, but we've been doing the state markers through our research grant program, and that funding comes from our Historic Preservation Commission. Our Historic Preservation Program budget on an annual basis is just under $90,000. And from that, we have to do everything that we do in the Historic Preservation Program. We do a lot of National Register nominations, and we do historic resource surveys, and sometimes we can utilize those funds as a match, through the cost share program that DHR has. But to date, all of the funding for the markers that we've done has been from that budget that is for the Historic Preservation Program and the Historic Preservation Commission. And we anticipate that that is how it's going to continue here initially. The likelihood of other outside groups wanting to purchase markers certainly it will be a consideration down the road. I think that's how DHR does it, where you have sponsors that pay for it unless it's some special program that DHR has for their state markers. And in addition to that marker cost, in these research grants, we do provide some money, some funding for the grantee to do the research and put together the application package. And we also provide them with some money to do a reception for the unveiling ceremony. So we give them a little bit of incentive at either end of the project, so we can ensure the success of it. So now at 3180, we're probably looking at investing close to $4,000 in some of these markers if we're paying for some of the research and preparation, and for the unveiling ceremony and a reception to follow.
That's great. There's it sounds like there's really a lot of support out there at the local level, and which is wonderful for people in communities, because they're going to have more direct access to y'all and your teams to have conversations about this. For folks that maybe their markers, ideas, their subjects are not making it to that, falling into one of these programs of direct support, say from the state or the locality. So one of the questions is, right, that $3,000 price tag might be sticker shock. And are there local programs out there modeled on, I'm sorry, let me get this question correctly here. Yes. Is there any consideration of smaller, less expensive markers that might fit on the side of a residence, a signpost, etc.? So I guess markers not sort of modeled after the state markers with the longer texts, but smaller, more modest signs.
I'll go first on that. We, in addition to our roadside marker program, we have a historic building plaque program. That is not an interpretive text. It's just a bronze plaque with the county seal on it. And it identifies, it has to be a willing landowner, willing property owner. Just identifies that this structure or building has been recognized by the Historical Commission as meeting the criteria for the plaque program. And honestly, I can't remember what that criteria is at the moment. But that's another program that our Historical Commission has. It's actually a really, really nice plaque. I wish I had a picture of it. We haven't, the program, when I first became liaison to the commission, that plaque program was really kind of on hold. It got very active for about 5 years, and we probably marked and recognized probably 5 or 6 structures, buildings and structures. And then that individual who was very active in the program left the commission, and the program kind of has waned in its activity level. But that's another way that we recognize buildings and structures specifically, but it's not part of our marker program. It's a different program.
Yeah, one thing to consider are the interpretive sign panels. I think I had an image of one. They're basically laminated signs, typically 24 by 36 inches in a metal stand. And depending upon your subject matter, they could be actually something that's better choice for you than one of these cast markers. You can put more text on them. You can put images on them so they can be a little bit more colorful. You can put a map on them. It takes a little bit of graphic design, but not a lot. Typically, installed, they're going to run around $2,000 or so to do those. So a little bit less expensive. That's certainly an option that I would recommend, particularly along walking trails or near historic sites. And we do have the plaque program as well. It's for our local historical register. That can help to recognize buildings, although we actually prefer they not place them on the building if possible. Maybe a little figure out a stand nearby that you can go on. But I would also look at the interpretive sign panels. They are a bit less expensive and have a lot of advantages with the graphics and the additional text that you can put on them.
Just want to interject really quickly, and this is probably for Jennifer, but do those interpretive kiosks that Mark is referring to, do they also need to go to DHR for approval?
Yeah, I mean, if they were placed on public property or in the public right of way, then yeah. So a local program, I guess as Mark says, it wouldn't have to be modeled on the style of the state markers, single post with a big sign panel on it. The entire local program could be made of those, more tabletop style markers of the type like that Civil War Trails uses, for example. So there's no need for a local program to be kind of the classic roadside marker style.
There's actually really good guidance on those wayside signs from the National Park Service that you can download. It goes through all of the design elements. There's, I don't know, dozens of different types of sizes that are available to you. There's dozens of different types of actual physical signage, how they're encased and presented. There's vertical signs, the typical wayside signs that you see at the National Park Service sites.
there's lots of different ways that you can interpret your history. It's really, if you're considering something like that, I think you really kind of need to sit down and think about what your goals are, what you're trying to do. You can have a multi-layered approach where you have a series of wayfinding signs that say, go point here, there's a historic site this way, and it's this name. And that could be a very small sign, maybe 8.5 by 12 inches with an arrow and an icon. And that would lead you to an interpretive kiosk where you have larger wayside signs and either single or multiple signs with various different interpretive topics. It's kind of the sky's the limit, which is great and also challenging because you kind of need to figure out what your goals are, what you're trying to do.
One of the powerful things about this interpretive vehicle is that it's tied to the landscape, like a lot of the historic resources that we're concerned with preserving. This is a question kind of about placement and experiencing these products. I'm going to quote, "I've noticed that some DHR markers don't really have adequate safe space to pull over near the marker. Is there any remedy for this situation, and how should the public and localities help DHR with this?" And they referenced Route 17 and Route 1.
Yeah, I mean, this has been an ongoing problem. It's one of the most frequent questions we get. Since the marker program began in the 1920s, and there were 1,400 markers in place by the time World War II started, the system of roadways and the speed of travel was extremely different then than it is now. And a lot of those markers are still in those same places. And, it is a challenge. For every new marker for the last few decades, at least, VDOT has sent out a traffic engineer to approve the location, and they are supposed to take traffic safety standards into account as they do that. VDOT is the agency that kind of has the final say on marker placement. The state markers are technically actually assets of VDOT, not DHR, since they, for the most part, stand in the VDOT right of way. So we really do the best we can as far as trying to get them set up in safe places where people can pull over. That does still leave us with quite a few that are not ideally located. If you are driving around and you see a marker that seems to be, in a dangerous location, or you think it poses a safety hazard, please let us know. And in those cases, we can request that VDOT relocate the marker, find a new spot for it. They are willing to do that, on a case-by-case basis. So please do let us know if there are any specific concerns that you have, and we will do our best to take care of it.
Thanks, Jen. Yeah, so just like history, these programs are very dynamic. They're not set in stone, even if they are cast in aluminum and perhaps set into a concrete foundation. But there's opportunities to develop and expand this program. I'd like to thank our panelists for an extremely enlightening conversation. With that dynamism in mind, if we didn't get to your questions, please feel free to follow up with us, and we'll get you answers to those, whether you're contacting the Department of Historic Resources, your localities, or Preservation Virginia. I'll go ahead and turn it back over to my supervisor, Amanda Terrell, who has some updates to share.
Thank you, Tim. So the first session of this year's Preservation Academy was on February 1st regarding DHR's new BIPOC grant fund, the Black, Indigenous, and People of Color Grant Fund. The recording of that session is available on Preservation Virginia's YouTube channel and on their website. And I believe Sonia's going to drop a link into the chat here for you. And more information about the program is available on DHR's website, including relevant documents about how to apply. And check DHR's website tomorrow for updates, because things are starting to happen there. And then there are 4 more webinars coming up in this series. on topics such as how to find preservation contractors, how to get involved with preservation in your community, dispelling common preservation myths, and historic tax credits for homeowners. And so we will drop a link in the chat to take you right to that registration page for those. And so before I turn it over to Elizabeth to close out today's session, I just want to say thank you to all the panelists and to everybody that supported this session. And thank you all for attending today. All right, Elizabeth.
All right, well, stole some of my thanks too. Thank you, everybody. It takes all of us to ensure that preservation around Virginia is vital and relevant. And certainly I've learned a lot about the marker programs, both the state and the local, that I think will really positions us to tell a comprehensive view of Virginia's history. Next, 2 weeks from today, we have our third webinar in the series. So please do register and join us and spread the word. I think finding skilled craft workers to work on these buildings is a challenge we all have in common. And so we want to not only share some tips, but also think about how we resolve those issues. You can also check Preservation Virginia's website for other virtual programming. We have a dynamic series of webinars. Keeper of the Light, Willis Augustus Hodges was the first African-American light keeper at the Cape Henry Lighthouse. And we have a session about him, as well as Landmark Ladies, Women in the Virginia Supreme Court. So please check out our website as well as DHR's for upcoming program and resources. And we hope to see you all back here again on March 1st. And a final thanks to our very talented team of panelists today. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.